Hey, it's Sammy for another episode of the IdOMUSIC podcast, and our goal and our mission is to empower and educate musicians and artists worldwide. And on today's episode, we sat down with entertainment executive Chris Hicks discussing forming Noontime, being innovative and conquering each job, and dealing with loss in the height of success. Hey, it's Sammy for another episode of the IdOMUSIC podcast, and I'm sitting down with executive producer, entertainment mogul, philanthropist, and the list goes on of what this man has done over the years. Chris Hicks.
Mogul?
Yeah, why not?
No, mogul.
Why not? We don't like that title?
Mogul's
I asked you.
Mogul's a lot.
It's not a lot. Your resume is a lot.
Mogul's a lot.
Your journey has been...
The journey is something different, but...
I think that gives you mogul status, honestly, in my opinion.
Okay.
But
we're going to roll with it then.
Let's roll with it. Okay. How you feeling?
Good.
I got Howard alum sitting with me. Yeah, it's very rare that I get to sit down with Howard alum, but I think that you can attest to this, that there's something very special about people who step on Howard's campus. And I think that also that was the start of your entertainment career, would you say?
Absolutely. I think that there's something about special about stepping on the campus, but I think it's about the people who step on the campus, but I think it's also something special about the campus.
Yeah, right? The history.
Yeah, I think it's... I'd never been around people who look like me, who were as progressive as the people that I interacted with when I got to school. And so it was a very different but very worthwhile experience on every level. So,
well, you mentioned already that was the start of your entertainment career. What was the first thing, like, what was your interest? What did you major in?
I was a communications major.
Okay, School of C.
Make a C's in School of Communications.
Hey. We had to get through. We had to get through it. I was also in School of C. Right. So, I mean, when did you realize that this was something you were passionate about, that you wanted to get into the entertainment business? Was it prior to going to Howard?
I think that your passion kind of runs within you, and you have to wait for a minute for it to kind of bubble up. Mm-hmm. So I think that I've always had a bit of a music Jones from the time I was a little kid. I think that reading records is actually how I learned how to read.
Really?
Yeah. You let my mom tell it.
Wow.
So, but when I got to Howard, one of my Noontime partners and one of my childhood friends, Ryan, he introduced me to Kasim Reed. And at the time, Kasim was the, I can't remember, I don't know if Kay was the president or vice president, but regardless, he was a person who oversaw all of the entertainment for Homecoming.
Oh, Homecoming Committee.
Yeah, and he, as we all have experienced with how he ran the city, it's always the biggest and the best. And so he would always, the lineup of that particular year, I think it was Jodeci, Boyz II Men,
oh, wow.
Mary, Teddy Riley, Rex and Effect. Anyway.
No.
He was short like 10 grand, and he had this conversation with Ryan, and we figured out how to get him the 10 grand. And I remember he gave us back like 11.5. And it was like, it wasn't a ton of money, but it was to watch him move and to watch him interact with different people. Same guy, same charisma, same confidence. Kay is probably one of the more brilliant people I know. And so to be able to witness his brilliance at an early age was inspirational. And he was doing it in a field that was something that looked like something we could do.
Mm-hmm. Many of the people that you have worked with over the years, like throughout your career, we're going to get into Noontime because I've been trying to connect this story for the longest on this podcast. But many of the people you've worked with over the years, you literally started with them. So like you said, Mary J. Blige you said Mary, but affectionately known as Mary to you, Mary J. Blige, Kasim Reed, etc. Why was establishing a great rapport at the time with these people? I mean, even if you didn't intentionally do it, why is establishing those good relationships important early on from the beginning?
I don't think you know that early. I think that you see something. If I use Kay as an example, I think I saw something in him that inspired me. Mm-hmm. It was. I would venture to say it was probably a little infectious. I knew that I wasn't him, but I think that we had shared qualities, and that started a relationship where we went on to do things together. And when you work with someone, you get an understanding of their character and how they're wired and how they're built. And so when you're in your 20s, you don't know who you should and shouldn't be making relationships with. That determination gets made later on in life. Um, as it pertains to Mary, I didn't even meet Mary that night.
Oh, okay.
No, I just think that I think everybody who heard Real Love when it came out knew that Mary was something special and was going to be a force to be reckoned with for a long time. At least I did. It seemed very obvious to me. But we didn't really make a real connection until later on in life.
Wow. You just haven't stopped at like one thing. That's what I think is super cool about your journey. It's like, yeah, you did music, and you did, then you go on to like TV and film, and then like in the political realm of things. But many people know that you started with creating or one of the people who started as a creator of Noontime, which, but you also moved on to like brokering certain deals for a lot of entertainers that we might know, from Kevin Durant to so on and so forth. We can get into that later. To producing your own web series and licensing them. How have you managed to like continue to grow but like seize your opportunities from one thing to the next?
I think I only have like about a 4-year attention span on whatever it is I'm doing.
Why?
I think that at least I fashion myself, or I'd like to believe that I'm either solving some sort of problem or introducing something and seeing if I can get that over the top. I wouldn't qualify myself as a good maintenance person because I'll lose interest quickly. Once we have gotten to the destination, then I feel like I need to find something else that kind of satisfies that Jones. And then I think I'm a hustler by nature. I was raised by hustlers, so that's just something that you take away.
Who were you raised by? Like, who are your parents? Like, what did they do?
Oh, wow. It's complicated, but my mom has always been very resolute in my life in every way. She's where I get a sense of moral fiber and fabric from, and definitely character. The sense of right and wrong. And how karma rules, got all that from my mom. My sense of spirituality from my mom. My father wasn't really present, but I think that what I did get from him based on our interactions was his brain works very quickly. And so I think that by simple genetics, I think that, and because I have a son, and I think my son is a pretty sharp guy, to say the least. But I think that I think that I got that from him, and I don't really fashion myself to be the smartest person in the world, but I think I'm definitely one of the sharper people that I know. So, and then, I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family. My father's side of the family was very entrepreneurial on like real estate and those kind of endeavors. And my mother's side of the family, they were all dope dealers. Wow. So my life kind of vacillated back and forth.
Talk about hustle.
Yeah.
Yeah, two different sides of the spectrum of hustle.
But you'd be surprised what it creates.
Nah, I mean, I'm looking at it. Yeah. So we finally have one of the major missing pieces on this podcast, like I said, that connects many of the stories we've already featured from, literally everybody that I feel like has been on this podcast has had some sort of interaction with someone in Noontime, right? Or has worked for Noontime. One of the co-founders, the CEO, why is Noontime such a pivotal part of everyone's story who has found great success in this business? Why would you say Noontime was like that thing?
I think I'm biased.
Of course you are, but
yeah, I think I'm biased, but we weren't takers. I think that we did fair business. And so it wasn't about trying to extract from you or strong arm you. This is the opportunity. This is the opportunity, and this is what's associated with this opportunity. This is what we'd like to get from it. This is what we think is fair for you to get from it. And if that's amicable for you, then let's move the needle forward. I think that pretense that we operated under allowed a lot of people to flourish under our umbrella. Um, and I think that the ones that survived it, and we went through a lot of growing pains ourselves. You know what I mean? Because we were friends that decided to come together to do business. And I've known Ryan since I was like 8.
So it was 4.
It was 3 of us initially, and then Terry came like
Gotcha.
very soon after. But
Gotcha.
it's the same thing. Known Ryan since I was 8, Noon since I was about 11 or 12, Terry since I was about 3.
Wow.
Our parents were friends.
Really?
Our mothers were friends.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And talk about like working with friends. So you speak about some of those struggles initially. I mean, at the time you're establishing your business. Can you recall some of those struggles at the time? Because when I look at your journey, obviously you see success. You know what I mean? You see like all the like shiny things and not shiny things literally, but you see the glamour and you see like, wow, he's worked with Steve Stout. He's worked with like all these people, but nobody really knows like what it took to get there. So especially with something like Noontime, for those that are probably listening to this that aren't really familiar, y'all were capable of being like one of the few successful publishing ventures.
Yeah. We did. I think you make a good point. I think we did ourselves a bit of a disservice because this is a loud world that we live in. And I mean this in a positive sense, but we were more of behind the strings shot callers. And I think that we came from the hustle. And one thing you learn from the hustle is the less you say, the less you got to take back. And so if you can make it, if you can prove it through the work, then it'll be loud enough. It'll be vocal enough. And then, I think for a time that worked. And then, in the age of social media and social leveraging, if you're not a loud person, then, you run the risk of your narrative being rewritten. And so, the good thing about it is that it's something that we have been quiet about. I think that doing this podcast today is kind of just scratching the surface of some of the things that'll come forth in the future about our journey, because it's a very atypical journey, specifically mine. But but I think that we weren't takers, and so it allowed us. We were able to build these relationships. Use Kurt as an example. It's a 20-25-year relationship because it was always very matter of fact. We got this going. Always a lot of transparency. Always, and okay. I think that when you do business with people, I think that it's only a win when both people win. When there's a loser in business, that just doesn't feel like good business to me. It's probably why I may not make $100 million, but it's just, but I can sleep okay at night.
Right, right.
I'm a role model for my kid. And so some things at a certain point start to supersede just the greed factor. Facts. But I think we were fair. I think we were fair with everybody. And I think that anybody who has done any business with us, I mean, we had a very interesting reputation that I come to find later on down the line. But
what do you mean by that?
But we came from the street.
Gotcha.
And so, we had I would hear all kind of things later on. Like we were bullying our talent and leveraging them in situations that they had no control of, which was kind of absurd. I mean, the only thing we were really beating them up with was opportunity and checks, to be very candid with you.
Well,
and you can ask any of them to this day. I'm still been in business with me personally, with Brian Cox and John T. Austin for like 20 years. I think between them, they probably got 12 Grammys. So you don't stay in those kind of business relationships long term when you've been mistreating people.
Right. Facts.
Yeah. But again, that goes back to the narrative, controlling your narrative and not being.
And that's why we have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to ask you specifically, how is Noontime capable of, because this is what is written, this is on your bio, like people go to your website, creating history as one of the few successful publishing ventures. Obviously doing fair business is one thing you said, and making sure that you're not taking, or you're not a taker, you're giving to, your clients. But what else, what would you say was so special about the four of you?
I think that we were innovative. I think that one thing about those guys, we're all just radically different personalities. But I knew that they were all killers. They were all savages in their own right. And so I knew that when I was having down days or when I was struggling to connect the dots, I knew one of them was actively trying to figure it out. And we had a very, it's never no kind of approach to what we were doing. maybe a distant yes from time to time, but it's just absolutely
Never know.
never know. Can just that was just hard to really stomach. And I think that we all appreciated, we came in this business with a very strong code, and I think to a large extent we still live by that. It gets the business being first generation anything can make things a little bit murky. But I think we have grown and matured beyond that. But so to your point, to build a company, I think we came up with a smart model. We built we created a building, created an infrastructure, an ecosystem where people could come and thrive. When the reason why we would come and do work, our finishing work at Patchwerk, is because we didn't charge our people to work in our studio. So we used it as a magnet to attract talent, and then we created business relationships with the talent that we attracted and tried to push those things to the next level. And it was a very collaborative environment. If you look over the catalog, I would venture to say maybe 50 to 60% of the actual copyrights are collaborations between two or more of our writers. So it was a very family-like, still competitive, but if Brian didn't have a vibe one day and he'd come to the studio and Jazzy was making something that was incredible, then they would either collaborate or Brian would find inspiration from that. And so they pushed each other. And so to watch each other's success. And, one thing I give these guys is they had a lot of moral fiber. They were raised the right way. And so they seemed to celebrate each other's success and still use it as motivation. And so it was the studio was a lure, and we figured out business relationships with the people who came through there that we wanted to have business relationships with.
Absolutely. And to kind of go into that point of you talking about the good competition and but also just building the team, obviously the four of you had a long-standing relationship. You've known them since you were younger, but my question would be in terms of expanding that team, was it a difficult thing for you to then expand your team or add more people to what you guys had already established? Because I'm sure each one of you were good at something, and that's why you came together to build this.
It's not why you come together.
No. Why do you come together?
Because you're friends.
Because you're friends.
And you trust each other. And in your mind, you feel like it's what you're supposed to do.
Okay. That's true.
So maybe it's a combination of two.
But you recognize certain things in your friends that you may not have.
That's what I was coming to. Yeah. Although we were friends, I think that Noon was just really tenacious in his own quiet way. I think Ryan is just Ryan could sell ice to Eskimo. It's
like all these names that I hear all the time. They're just mystery people to me. So it's cool to see okay, this is Chris.
Yeah.
We have Chris here.
And then Terry's going to be out in front. He's going to let everybody know. Right, he and Ryan, but he's going to let everybody know what we're doing and how they're missing out on something. And so, and I think for myself, I just had a very strong affinity to the creative process and how to move those people along, how to create some sort of collaboration and make product that we could get out.
Were you ever interested in being the artist or the producer yourself?
I think that my gift is being able to be able to discern and to be able to objectify and get those guys to understand that whatever I'm trying to get you to facilitate, I can hear it. That was my gift, is that I could hear it.
Yeah, well, speaking of you being able to hear it, you end up going off to do your own thing and step out into other ventures. But it seemed like you and your partners were doing well as entrepreneurs and establishing Noontime. Why didn't you stay that route, or why did you take a job working for someone else?
I think that I think for lack of a better way of putting it, we grew apart. I think that when females come into the play and when people start to get into serious relationships, then we went from having each other's, sleeping on each other's couches and having the last conversation with each other at night to now everybody's having a conversation with a significant other. And so you're getting their input and you're getting their thoughts. And I just think that fundamentally, I think the passions kind of shifted and changed.
Which happens.
You know what I mean? And you don't really know that. It's because it burns when you're going through it. You know what I mean? It can be definitely rough sledding when you're going through it. But I think that when you get to the other side of it, you reflect back on it, you realize that it had to happen. Those changes had to take place. And you know, everybody's perspective of the story will be different. I'm certain if you sit down and talk to all four of us. But for me personally, I felt like everybody just kind of went and ran with their passion. And I think that if they all are honest, I think that I was a bit of the glue because I was the only one who had a relationship with everybody before this started. And so when it disbanded, you know, you get into a point where you have to figure it out. You have to figure out what the next component looks like. And you know, it's kind of where it left me.
Noontime. We're gonna see a documentary.
Oh, I'm sure you'll see
you all
different iterations of how that story is told.
But like, are you for going to establish like tell you talk about, you know, creating your own narrative and not allowing somebody else to?
No, I think the documentary will come, but I think something scripted will come too, just because it was different. It was very different. Very, very
You holding out on me. What does that mean?
No, it's just like I'm trying to think the best way to explain it. I think a lot of people have probably come from some of the things that we have come from to get to the other side, but not the way we did it. Not the way we did it. And it's, you know, so much is you know, you don't want to let so much of the cat out of the bag, but what am I, 48 now? So 30 years ago, totally different guy. I was under indictment. I was looking at 30 years.
Wow.
We all had some different challenges. And so, and now I have a business card with a government seal on it. So it's just, if you look at it from that perspective, it was in, you know, politics. No, I think I didn't even come here to be in politics. Actually, I didn't come to the city. I'm digressing, but I didn't even come to the city to put it in context.
How did you end up in Atlanta?
We came down here and promoted a show for Freaknik.
Wow.
Right.
I feel like everybody came there for Freaknik.
It was the last year that the actual that Morris Brown Stadium was open, and so we got together with Luke and his camp, and we kind of co-promoted something, and we had like 35 acts there.
Wow.
So we kind of got duped into believing that, you know, Atlanta was going to be like that all the time for live performance. And so then taking it back to 59 to Kasim, he helped us, you know, so Kay's a blue blood here, so he knows everybody. And so he created a relationship with us with the Russell family and helped us lease our first piece of property for almost no money.
Wow.
And we just kind of set sail. And I had gone through so many perils in DC, specifically from a legal standpoint. And I just felt like, you know, I could be in the middle of a football field and would feel like I was in a closet. So it was definitely time for me to move my energy somewhere else before somebody moved it for me. So when we came down here, we started to promote, and before we learned very quickly that that it wasn't a robust market to promote rap shows here. So before we lost everything, we built a studio about the size of this table and started signing songwriters and producers. And a lot of people that we had gone to school with were starting to really establish themselves in the music industry. And so we had some points of entry. And what we were doing was a little unconventional because we were actually trying to sign songwriters and move them along as songwriters, not as co-producers, or they were co-producing with us. No, there was, you know, you guys are the creative talent and we are the executive team, and we're going to try and move this forward. And that's kind of just how it started. We had a lot of support. Kasim was obviously a very strong supporter. The Russells were strong supporters, indirectly.
Yeah.
And then I think that we were just very aggressive about what we wanted to make happen. Divine Stevens was a strong supporter. Kevin Wales was a strong supporter. You know, all these people helped us move our vision forward.
What do you think they saw?
We definitely are blue blood hustlers. Like there's just a tenacity involved with how we move, and it's just a relentlessness, not an aggressiveness, but a relentlessness about what we did, and we're gonna keep doing. We're gonna keep going and keep going until we get to the W.
Facts. So you eventually go to Def Jam, right?
I went to Warner before I went to
Warner
Def Jam.
before Def Jam.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess so that was after Noontime. You went to Warner?
Mm-hmm.
And what were you doing at Warner?
I ran Warner's urban music department. The joint venture that we have on the publishing side was with Warner Chappell, and they were literally getting out of the urban music business. Edgar Bronfman had just bought the company and taken it private. Yeah, private. So they were getting out of urban music business, and Rick Shoemaker, God bless Rick, really good guy. He was the president at the time, and he called me and said, "And we're getting out of urban music business, but you guys you're good at, you understand this space. We're still a big company. We're going to get calls. Why don't you come and consult?" And so for me, it was a time when we were going through this separation with my partners, and so I was like, "Oh, how much you paying?" And he was like, "Well, we're paying like $40,000." And so, which obviously wasn't a lot of money, but I was like, for me, it was an opportunity to kind of learn the business from a different perspective. And so I asked him, I was like, what's the most you can pay me? So I think they worked it up to like 52 or 55 grand. So he hired me as a vice president on the publishing side. I got to keep my venture there, and hired me as a vice president for 55 grand, which is probably about a quarter of what my contemporaries were making. And it gave me a chance to learn the playing field from the inside out, which was great for me because I think that they were getting out of the business. And so they kind of looked at it like, here's this lot of land, and just take care of it, make sure no weeds grow, and keep it cut. But for me, I was like, man, I ain't never had this much land. I can dig down, I can reinforce it 4 floors, put some parking underneath it, and I can go up, build 12 stories and turn this into a skyscraper.
Facts.
And probably 2 years into it, we went from number 5 to number 2 in market share, because he let me take a small company mentality approach with a large company. And so the same way I had built my own company is the same approach I took to building out the urban community there. Drummer Boy, Justice League, I signed all those guys.
Why was that important to take a small business mentality to put it inside that sort of infrastructure for a larger company?
Because they bought late. They would buy after you had traction. And to me, I wanted to buy early and create traction.
Right.
Because then the money spent is a much more worthwhile spend. So like if you think about somebody like Drummer Boy or Justice League, who were like some of my early signings there, they didn't have any songs on the chart when I signed them. But I signed Drummer and put him in the studio with people. I put Justice League in the studio before they even signed their deal, so they knew that it was real.
Right.
Yeah, their first person they went in the studio with was Mary.
Really? Oh, yeah.
So yeah,
he was on here.
No One Will Do. It's the first song on the breakthrough.
Yeah. Wow. That's dope. So I'm sorry, I'm trying to tie all these things together. So many things.
I told you it was a lot.
It's a lot.
We haven't even scratched the surface.
We haven't.
No.
We haven't. We really haven't. We haven't even gotten into it. But how did it feel working on Mary J. Blige's album, actually? We can go there. Because that was...
It was the icing on the cake for me.
Right. I'm like...
Yeah, because, everybody I used to go... And we've worked with some real luminaries. I mean, we have Aaliyah in our catalog. Oh, wow. Nobody can say that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, we have 2 or 3 hits from Aaliyah. So I felt like we had just worked with and when you work with Puff, you see everything, right? I felt like we had worked with everybody with the exception of Mary. And that was almost like a calling card. Who you work with? Everybody except Mary. And so the way to get to Mary was through my cousin Damon. Damon and Kendu were very good friends. Or they had grown up together. But that actually worked against us because Kendu looked at us as just Damon's homeboys. So I'm not going to put my wife in the studio with Damon's homeboy.
Right.
And I didn't really realize that until later on down the line. And so we were at P.F. Chang's one day in Los Angeles. And, Kendu was telling us how much work we needed to put in to actually have an opportunity to be on Mary's album, yada, yada, yada. So we went to he just gotten a sound system in his Ferrari redone. And so we were all in the valet parking lot. And I was like, you know what? Listen to this. So he put the CD in, and it was a demo of No One Will Do. I don't even think he was all the way through the first verse. He turned around and asked me, "Can I have this?" I was like, "Absolutely." And so that kind of started.
Wow.
It started that train of working with her, and then a few months later, they got into a very interesting situation with Interscope and the releasing of the album. The Breakthrough was supposed to be a greatest hits album.
Mm.
Yeah, you make
Interesting.
that look. I mean, and this is a greatest hits album, and they had songs like No One Will Do. They had songs like Take Me As I Am. They had songs like what's my favorite song? Enough Crying. They had all these songs, and it was still supposed to be a greatest hits album. And Jimmy and Kindu put a call into Brian asking him to make a rhythmic ballad like We Belong Together. So long story short, he and Jonte went in the studio that night. They made 3 songs. We ended up sending just that one. And she recorded it, and they put it out, and it went to number 13 in 2 weeks. And the greatest hits album turned into the Breakthrough album.
Right. Right. Which was huge because it broke a SoundScan record.
Yeah, it sold like 700 and some change the first week.
That's
and
insane.
It was just real vindication for me on so many levels, because it just took so long to just break through.
You're like, I told y'all I could do this.
I didn't say that, but I was
That's what you felt.
I was definitely feeling that, yeah, without question.
But I mean, okay, so did you feel pressure to follow up from that? That's more so what I wanted to ask you, because the next project, Growing Pains, I mean, it did really well too, though. But did you feel that pressure at the time?
But it was different, because when we were doing the Breakthrough, it was just us. And by the time we got to Growing Pains, everybody had an opinion.
Of course.
I mean, everybody. And so, and one thing I've learned about the creative process is that, you can't create the same magic twice. You have to go and find some different magic. So to make another song like Be Without You was, you live and you learn, but it was just not possible. It was the R&B song of the decade. So you just, those just don't fall out of the sky. And, Jazzy and Tricky produced the next, and Dream co-wrote with Mary the next single on the first single on the following album, on the Growing Pains album, and it did remarkably well. But it wasn't that, and everybody was looking for that as her barometer. And nobody does everything well, and so you have certain artists that have like superstar pop status. I don't know if Mary will ever have that, but she is tried and true in the Black community and just iconic like none other. She's our Aretha Franklin. She's and so none of those stars have that as she has, have the cachet that she has either. So you walk a line creatively.
Facts. All right, let's get into Def Jam real quick. So you had a lot of success when you were the president, right?
I was the senior vice president, head of urban music.
Head of urban. And LA was running the label.
I was senior vice president, head of urban music at Warner. LA was running Def Jam. He was running Island Def Jam, so it was Island and Def Jam together.
Okay. I mean, it's just, I guess my question there would be like, it seemed like LA got a ton of credit for turning that situation around, but did you have any part in helping in the success of that, or no?
I think Def Jam was already successful when I think that, a close friend of mine worked at Def Jam before I got there, Shakir. And I think that Shakir had experienced phenomenal success with Def Jam before I even got there. I went there after he passed away, and so the vibe of the company was much different than the success that they had or portrayed in the open market before I got there.
Speaking of Shakir Stewart, for those that aren't, he was a giant in the business. Why would you say he was successful, was my first question. Why would you say that he was able to do all the things that he was able to do?
Selfishly? Because he comes from us. I mean, and we come from him. He started in this game with us. He was passing out flyers with us. We were trying to figure out what Noontime was going to actually be.
And how has his death affected you? Because that was like a close friend of yours.
I think to when he passed, I didn't really understand why. and then you walk this dog through. You know, I ended up going to Def Jam after him. Ended up being executive vice president at Def Jam, which is something that he was. I ended up working in that environment. Ended up having some success in that environment. And so I got a very keen understanding as to how the business could have affected him. And so
in terms of stress, in terms of health, is that what you're saying?
I could touch on a lot of things. It's the stress factor of it. I think that when you get, I think a lot of us are first generation things, you know, so we're first generation success, or in some context, some first generation money. And I think that the way people perceive you can be a little isolating. You know, I've had people tell me that, you know, your worst day is still my best day. So that's a person who just lacks a fundamental understanding of what I may be going through, and in turn what he may have been going through on a day-to-day basis. Is because you're working with superstars and you're making some money and you're having some success that you don't have any stressors, when actually it's quite the contrary.
Right. Full circle moment. Well, first off, most people ascend to a title really high in the music industry, or that high in the music industry, as you seem to play. As you seem to have done, but they usually play like musical chairs between labels, and you didn't really like hop around after you had the success at Def Jam. You left and actually went left, like completely, which may be from, I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, but from some of the things that you were seeing and how stressful it could be, the environment, or what you said initially of you like not being able to sit still for long?
I think it's a combination of the two. I think it's for me, it was a bit of the perfect storm of I don't have an intention. I'm not a maintenance person, and it started to feel like maintenance. I'm definitely, I don't want to sound pretentious, but I'm a bit of a conqueror. I like to try and figure something out and then move on.
Yeah.
And I felt like between Bieber, between Jennifer Lopez, I felt like in a short window, I was about as successful as I was going to be there. I think that some of the stressors were, because it's isolated. It's a very isolating position. And then, you know, one of the few people who could probably understand what I was experiencing had passed away. So someone who had some perspective on what it was. I think that it's a pyramid of success for a reason, because the closer you get to the top, there's less space. You know what I mean? And I think that that's where politics really start to kick in. And for me, it was never about the politics. It was about the wins and the losses. And so when the politics start to outweigh the wins, then you have to take a hard look at what you're doing. At least I did personally. And I felt like that's what had happened in that particular situation.
I would say it's not to cut you off, but I would say it's a little easier to walk away from a situation when you do things like Justin Bieber, you know, signing Justin Bieber, or, you know, what you guys end up doing with J-Lo, and even getting these like global partnerships. And I thought that was super interesting how you were able to, you know, leverage that as well.
I think it was great in the moment, but, you know, it's all revisionist history at this point. If you look at how the narrative, is told, maybe I didn't sign Justin. Maybe I didn't make the albums that I made. Maybe they put my name on the back of all the albums just because I'm a nice guy and I didn't necessarily have a skill set, or didn't necessarily figure out how to get that deal done.
Well, what would Chris say he did?
Chris would say that he played his part and he did what all parties contracted him to do. And it's
very legal answer.
And people, you know, I think that revisionist history is very strong in the music space. And in that particular time, it was a very diluted, it was a dying space. And, you know, I understand, I took it real personal then, but I understand it better now. And I think that takers just take. And I don't think I'm of that fabric. And I think that that's what the corporate fabric is. And so rather than ask them to adjust themselves and how they've done business for, a century, the real adjustment has to be made on my part.
Right.
And I'm not making it. I hate to just create an undertone like this, but if I had run a successful music publishing company, if I was a successful record maker independently and music publisher independently, if I had done it successfully on a corporate level as well, if I'd signed Bieber, if I self-published 35 number one records, if I'd taken a company from number 5 to number 2 in a couple of years, if I'd done J-Lo's comeback album, if I'd done Mary J. Blige's comeback album, and I was a different skin color, I wouldn't have had the same issues.
Mm-hmm. Facts.
Yeah. But I'm
a
black man with a perspective, so
yeah,
you know how that can go.
I do understand that very well. So
but I needed a new chase too. I did, and
TV and film ended up being that new chase.
It did.
Full circle moment too, because now you're working with or at the time he was Mayor Kasim Reed, and with the City of Atlanta venture as the director of the Mayor's Office of Film and Entertainment. So I'm from here. We talked about this off the record, but we didn't have that. We didn't have like what Atlanta is today. You kind of you shaped the fabric of what entertainment and film is. And we have Dilla here as well, who we spoke to before, who works there as well. So I want to ask you, like, why was that an important venture for you after working in the music industry for so long? Why was getting into film and TV kind of on your mind?
I think I needed a new chase.
Yeah.
And then I was maturing. And so when you're young, you don't have a perspective to tell story from. Mm-hmm. But when you've lived through a few things, then you start to gain it very quickly. And then if you watch television, I would watch shows like House of Cards and Are the Wire, and I would gain context of how storytellers are actually telling stories and what kind of experience they had to have drawn upon to be able to come up with this kind of narrative. And I realized at a minimum that I'd had some of those experiences. Mm-hmm. And then two, the way that I had success in the music industry, I think that the music business is a young man's game. And I'm not knocking it because I was once that guy.
Right.
And so, you have to have that synergy to me to be able to put that grind in. And I felt like I had gotten to the point where for all the cachet that had happened in my career, if I wasn't going to run something, then I probably needed to move on and find a new passion. And I talked to Kay about it, and he was like, what we have going here, if you come here, he just caught me out of the blue. I mean, that my interest to change, I definitely shared that with him. I shared it with anybody I came in contact with, is because it's just where my mind was. And then one day out of clear blue, he was just like, I need you to come do this for me. And for me, I was like, I couldn't say no to him. Because he was the mayor of the city, but he's also, I would consider him a friend, because whether I talk to him every day or not, the relationship was very tried and true in my mind. And he's one of the few people on the planet that I actually have that level of respect for. So I couldn't say no, but it was interesting because running the Office of Film and Entertainment with so much synergy coming to the state and to the city from the film and TV opportunity, I'll never forget, like my third day working there, he was like, people that you've been looking for will be looking for you. And so that was a light bulb moment. But that's a testament to his genius. I think that he knew that it was something I would manage and I would thrive in. And so that's kind of how that came together.
So, I mean, let me ask you, because, like, entertainment seems very...
broad.
Yeah. But, I mean, like, music specifically seems pretty loose, where in terms of, like, it's not as rigid as, like, the political realm. I mean, you said it yourself. You didn't necessarily imagine yourself being in politics. What are some skills that you feel like you perfected in the music business that you were able to take over into the political arena, if any?
Well, I think if you back it up to the time I was a kid, there's always a street politics that kind of runs.
That's true.
So you learn a great deal from that. And then I think when you move into the music industry, it has its certain aspects of politics as well. And so clearly with some of the things that I embarked upon and some of the situations I managed to involve myself in, I learned a great deal about how politics work on the highest level. the music industry. And then so coming here, I felt like I could adapt, and I think that he saw that in me as well. It was strange though, because I didn't really think that I was coming here to be a part of politics. I thought that we have a thriving film and entertainment, and film and entertainment is thriving here, and he wants that overseen. He was, had the vision enough to actually create an office where you couldn't, if you wanted to film in Atlanta, you have to make a stop by the mayor's office and have a conversation with us. And so that gave us some inroads with some of the productions that were coming here, and made us Atlanta a staple, very much so like Los Angeles is or New York is in a tenth of the time. And so, I credit him with a lot of that vision. And so I kind of saw initially me coming into it as kind of just overseeing the vision that he had put forward. Yeah. It definitely proved to be a lot more than that. But yeah, it was.
So what were some of your responsibilities as the director of this new venture?
Well, Dilla really, I say this to anybody who listens, she really runs the office. I just have the hard conversations from time to time. Whatever she programs me to say. Yeah, right. But, I think that I learned a lot just from a political standpoint. I mean, I don't want to digress, but, I feel like this in my heart. I feel like, the 59th mayor of Atlanta is one of the more dynamic features, one of the more dynamic political personalities to ever do it. And I think he is, I think he suffers in some context from his own success, and I know what that feels like. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I know when you've given people reason, when you're successful and it gets harder. You know what I mean? Which can be a little bit confusing. Yeah. But
how does that feel? What is? I haven't experienced that.
That's a very isolating feeling, because again, no matter whatever success people perceive you to have, they view that as the end all and be all. Mm-hmm. And it's not, right. And it's helpful and it's great, but it's not a problem solver. It's not a cure all. And so to operate under that guise is a bit of a misnomer. It's not the way the world works.
Right.
Yeah.
What would you say your biggest success has been so far, or your proudest moment has been so far? Just in life. Yeah.
My kid.
Yeah.
By far. Yeah. I mean, he trumps everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being a father. How do you balance that? I mean, he's what, 12, 13?
He's 14 now. And I think that having a child will help you understand just how selfish an individual you're capable of being, because the initial thought that comes to your mind and then what you realize you have to do always supersedes that thought. But it's just that initial selfish thought. I'm going to go do this. Right. I'm going to do that. But no, he is taking precedence over everything. And I think that, if God had asked me, okay, so I'm going to give your son, like, what do you want? What's the criteria, the boxes you're looking to check? I wouldn't have thought of everything.
Right.
No.
Right. Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. So I want to actually talk to you about, or for you to talk to us about the Creative Industry Fund that you helped create for the city. Now, how did that come about, and what does that actually offer creatives in Atlanta?
If you look about it, if you think about it in this context, I think that Atlanta has built tremendous case study in the music space. You look at people like LA and Babyface. They came here, over 2 decades ago, and they planted some seeds here, and some flowers grew. I say this all the time. And then people like Rico Wade and Sleepy and Ray from Organized Noise, or Jermaine, or Dallas, they wanted to emulate that success. So they planted their own seeds. They're like, man, he did it. I'm watching him doing it. I can do it. Mm-hmm. And so then people like us came along, and Red Zone, who wanted to emulate what they had done. And before you know it, we had, now it's Coach and P and Future and all of these guys. And so, we have a pretty strong stranglehold on the left-hand side of Billboard for the last 2 decades. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have the benefit of large companies coming here spending $5 billion in infrastructure. We didn't have the benefit of a tremendous tax credit to support the cause. We didn't have the benefit of over $3 billion a year in direct spend in that space. We didn't have the benefit of $9.5 billion of economic impact. And so the film industry has that here. what they are lacking is most of the IP, I'm going to say 99.99, with the exception of Tyler, most of the IP that is shot here doesn't get greenlit from here. And to me, that's just, that doesn't even make sense. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like just allowing somebody to grow fruit in your backyard and then taking it back to wherever they came from. And so with Creative Industries Fund, we just recognize the needs to try to embrace the creatives in our community from a creative standpoint. You know, so many of the training programs that exist, whether it's Workforce or Georgia Film Academy, train below the line, but it doesn't look out for the above the line creative who's trying to create that next screenplay, that next narrative, who's a creative storyteller. And so what we wanted to do was create an avenue for that environment of creative that lives here in Atlanta. And so it's a very simple fund. You have some due diligence to do creatively to put forth your project. We've created a couple of boards, a board that actually approves the fund, and then an active board that once you have a project that's tangible that can be taken out into the creative ecosystem, and the second board helps to move that along through all the different production companies, agencies, lawyers, to kind of help you connect the dots.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. Thank you for that. So we have talked about some of your struggles early on, your sacrifices that you made. I mean, not a great deal, but we talked about some of those sacrifices that you were making early on, establishing Noontime, going on to the label, and et cetera. But like, how have you been enjoying the fruits of your labor? I mean, obviously spending time with your kid, enjoying your life.
That's a struggle. I think that when you come from where I came from, I think that, just how I was brought up, it kind of puts you in this cycle of planning. So put you in a cycle of being concerned about tomorrow. You know what I mean? And so you're not even out of one success before you're focusing on something else, or you're not out of one situation before you're focusing on the next. And so that's been a very difficult cycle for me to break, because you realize as an entrepreneur, as someone who's a free spirit, that you have to make the ground underneath you sound. No one else is going to do that for you. And so when you've experienced rainy days, you experience some cold moments, you have to always prepare for those. And so my mind I've always trained myself to kind of prepare myself to those. But what it does is it takes you out of the present. And so I have to really push myself to stay in the present as much as possible.
Absolutely. Well, if you knew then what you know now, what would you tell 21-year-old Chris Hicks?
But definitely live in the moment. Definitely live more so in the moment. 21-year-old Chris Hicks wasn't a patient individual at all. And so I've acquired a lot more, and I'm still not a very patient individual, but I've acquired far more patience than I had as a young man. I would be very selective about my network of people, because I think that you have some people. The reason why I'm really close to some of the guys I started with is because, not that we didn't go through our perils and our trials and tribulations, but they're very solid individuals, and we're going to be friends no matter what my value proposition is. Whether I can give you a publishing deal, or whether I can help propel your artist, or whether I just want to do nothing but just be friends.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so you can get that confused in this business very quickly. And so I think that I would just, a bit of a cautionary tale.
Absolutely. So sitting at the top of any industry, and you already spoke on this, it could be a lonely place, especially for a Black man, especially for, someone who's come from where you've come from and your particular circumstances. When you have issues or you need someone to talk to, bounce ideas off of, who do you run to?
It's a bit segregated, based on whatever the particular instance is, but that's a very small circle. I could count that on one hand.
One hand.
Easily. Yeah, it's yeah.
You're not gonna say who it is.
Well, it's just it's a very, 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 no one you would really know. So,
okay.
But it's a very, very small circle. it's very difficult to. I don't think that the folks in the music industry just overall are friends. It's really about value proposition most of the time. And so I think that when you recognize that, or at least that's my own perspective, I think that when you recognize that, it kind of takes you to a grassroots place of, you know, who can share context with me who doesn't really care about, you know,
what you can offer,
what I can offer, or what I've done, or where I'm going, or what I'm going to do. And so that when you whittle all of that down, that's a very small number of people.
Twinkle, twinkle.
My mom.
Understood. Your mom. Understood. So I guess my last thing is, like, what's the future for Chris Hicks? I mean, you're always working on the next thing. You can't necessarily sit still. So I know that you have something up your sleeve.
No, I'm full blown with the content in the content space. You know, I feel like this smartphone that everybody's walking around with is new television. I think that anybody who has to aggregate eyeballs for some form of subscription, the only thing that makes one different from the other, whether it's Apple from Spotify, or whether it's Disney from Netflix, or whether it's AT&T from Verizon, is the value of the content that they have on that subscription platform. And so I think that there are wild opportunities in that space. And I think if you borrow from what has happened in the music space, it's not like anybody here in Atlanta waited for a large corporation to say, you know what, we're going to make Atlanta hot now.
Right.
Didn't work like that. And so we made records and we put them out, and they connected. And I think that the same opportunities from a storytelling standpoint exist in the content space. If you look at some of the more prolific storytellers emerging that have some melanin in their skin, whether it's now Ava, I think, you know, not to sidebar, but I think Ava just made a piece of one of the pieces of all time with When They See Us. But if you look at Ava, or if you look at Tyler, if you look at Will or Lee Daniels, they all took the initiative to make and create on their own before somebody anointed them or somebody said, you know, we're going to give you some leeway to do that. And I think that we have that opportunity here.
Absolutely. So I feel like all the pieces are finally coming together with your story. I mean, obviously, I would love to talk to the rest of the guys. But what I would like to say about your journey is that I appreciate the tenacity. I appreciate you never, you know, settling for one thing, and proving to other people, young people who have more than one interest, that you can do all those things. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I wish you much success.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. It's been a long time coming. And tell them where they can find you on social media, where they can get in touch if you'd like.
I'm Chris Hicks _ on Instagram, but it's a lonely place. It's me and my fam.
That's cool. You know,
it's great, actually. It's great. That's about it, though.
Cool. And as always, you guys can follow this podcast at IDM Podcast, as well as myself on all social media platforms at Sammy Approved. Thank you again, Chris.
Thank you so much.
Sonically superior.